Welcome to Homers Anonymous. We have today talk about the quarterfinals of the 2015 Champions League. Unfortunately, you won't see any English teams in there, which could be an entire podcast in and of itself. But today we're not going to focus on the bad. We're not going to focus on the Chelseas and Manchester Cities of the world. We're going to focus on the remaining teams. We have in the... Well, I guess we'll just go down in chronological order when they're going to play. The first match I look at is Atletico Madrid versus Real Madrid. These teams will play the first leg at the Vicente Calderón, Atletico's home ground. The game, if you don't know, is going to be on April 14th. It's the first leg. And fun fact and kind of sad fact is that these two games will be the 7th and 8th times they've played each other this season.
Yeah, between the
is that enough? Is that enough? It's a lot. I don't think I've ever heard of that happening before.
No, I think when we had, what was it, 2 years ago? 3 years ago with Barca and Real Madrid, that they had 6 matchups. This is 8 in 1 year. And this is obviously a rematch of last year's final. So
yeah, I mean, if these teams don't know each other well enough already, they certainly will by the end of this one. Everything points towards Madrid being the favorites here. I don't want to say Madrid winning here because Atletico are actually a team that really, really thrive against Real Madrid.
They've kind of owned them this year in person.
They look almost like free scoring against them. They've put past 3 or 4 goals in multiple different matches against them. That being said, it's a very big advantage to have the second leg at home.
Absolutely, you know what you're going for. You know how many goals you need to make up for.
We've seen teams who've I don't think Real Madrid are going to set up this way, but we've seen teams set themselves up to go through it in a two-legged tie by sort of setting up defensively in the first match, maybe grabbing one away goal and saying to themselves, okay, I can settle for that. And then if they need to really go for it at home, they've got the home crowd behind them and can gather the energy to really to come back if they need to, or to hold on for a win if they need to. Just as long as they're not called Chelsea Football Club. Sorry, I forgot about that part.
A bit disappointing. I mean, I guess we'll get to that more with PSG.
Yeah, we'll talk about that with PSG, I guess. But Real, though, I'm going to be ballsy and say that they're going to lose this.
Yeah, I was going to take Atletico too, and
so not that ballsy.
They started off the season spectacularly, and they've. This matters in soccer more than any other sport. It feels, they've had such a dip in
form is everything. Form is your confidence, and I would kind of equate it to like college football, and that form and momentum has such a big factor, and it can turn like that. All it takes is a great player, a great goal at a very opportune time. In a game that a team could be struggling in, and all of a sudden the team is riding high and they have the confidence to go kick the shit out of someone who might have beaten them by 3 goals a week before.
I hate to be the guy and say it, but, especially with that James Rodriguez injury, breaking his foot and been out 2 months, that has really hurt Madrid in a lot of ways. Isco is a fine player, but, not a direct replacement. He fit into that team really well, surprisingly, coming straight over from Monaco. And not having him in the midfield helping push forward, feeding it out on the counterattacks has kind of killed them.
Yeah, I mean, any other club, this wouldn't be a time of crisis. I mean, we're addressing this right after they just lost the second
2-1
El Clasico of this season to Barcelona. By no means a bad performance by them. It wasn't overly amazing. It's as good of a performance as most teams have really given off against at the Camp Nou this season.
Quite uninspiring, though.
Well, they made it a fight, which is what you kind of have to do. You don't
11 cards in that game.
Yeah, you're going to get your own cards because obviously when you're playing against very tricky players like what Barcelona have, that you just kind of have to keep them in check. You can't let them just run rings around you, and so I respected that performance. They kind of succumbed to a couple of defensive lapses and I think a moment of brilliance from Luis Suarez. Maybe people don't appreciate that winning goal for what it was, but that was a very, very well taken first touch from a long ball from Dani Alves.
We don't want to get too much into Barca right now, but like you said, Suarez in the last couple of months has really found his place finally.
Exactly.
In the squad.
So back to Atletico and Real. My actual analysis of it and what I think of their matchup 1-on-1 is that I think Atletico they're a team very well built to kind of counteract what Real Madrid want to do. What Real Madrid want to do to beat you like 3 or 4-0. And that's that Atletico like to sit back. They like to constrict the space in and around the box, especially at the 18-yard box in the areas where most teams kind of try to use very, very tricky link-up play to get better shots and get better open shots or guys in on goal. They're really, really good at like just limiting that and cutting that off at the bud. They'll let you have everything you want between their halfway line and pretty much up to 30 yards from their goal. But once you get within 30 yards of that goal, they're cracking down on it. And we've seen teams like Barcelona struggle with it because that's again something that they like to do, is try to create goals in that space that I'm referencing that Atletico are good at shutting down. But Barcelona are a little bit more fine-tuned at like working in smaller and operating in smaller areas than Real are. Real are just a team of athletes. They're a team of very, very skilled, but mostly athletic players.
Well, and another thing, too, is we've seen, and this is really cost them in games against Barca and Atletico this year, Real Madrid, more than any other big team in the world, tend to lose patience very quickly and can be frustrated.
And for me, that kind of goes on Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. That's an area where it's not a very celebrated role, but their roles of the sort of deep-lying playmaker who need to be the ones that create the passes to players like Cristiano and to players like Gareth Bale and Karim Benzema. They need to make the pass to the player who then makes the pass that's the assist. And for me, especially in that Barca game, and more so in the Schalke game, the second one where they struggled, they almost got knocked out. I mean, they certainly scored enough to get through, but there were just some sloppy passes. There were just some missed passes. There was just it wasn't like a very dominating performance for a team that you'd expect to dominate someone like Schalke. Hell, they beat them 8 or 9-0 last year.
Yeah, I mean, we hear it so often, especially Modric referred to as the metronome of that team, and when it's off, the whole team can be off.
It's I think that could be fixed simply by having them, either of those players, accept their defensive duties, because you absolutely have to at this point against these high caliber teams. But they seem to be having too much trouble switching and they seem to be having trouble like multitasking between the two.
This is where you miss, especially the experience and skill set of a Xabi Alonso, who's gone, of Sami Khedira, who's fallen off a little bit. We've heard today, actually, he's planning on leaving at the end of the season now.
I mean, just because a Modric or a Toni Kroos is a deep-lying midfielder who likes to sit back and not really join in on the attack too much, doesn't mean they're a defensive midfielder. They operate in the same space, but they provide very different roles for their teams. So it's tough having both of them in there together. They're certainly good enough to be in there together, but when one of them is picking up the ball deep in midfield and making that pass that I was referencing to earlier, the other one needs to be thinking, okay, I need to be available for a short pass in case the team that just lost the ball tries to pressure to get it back. And if they do pressure and they do get it back, I need to be right there to counter that.
That's what they need a Khedira, cutting off those passing lanes coming back.
Exactly. Yeah, I really like this Atletico team.
Yeah, it's just matchup wise too is one of those things. I think that's why we're both taking them. If we're even, let's say Juventus or someone here, we'd be like, oh yeah, we'll take Real Madrid. They have their problems, but they can easily mask them again. This is to me the worst matchup they could have asked for in this tournament, even over Barca.
Yeah, and I think we're speaking off of their recent form. It's hard to kind of separate yourself and put yourself outside of the bubble that is the short-term thinking of professional soccer and professional football. When your team's drawn one game and lost another, all you can think about is in that bubble. You think to yourself, oh my gosh, we haven't won a game in 2 weeks. Oh my gosh, when will we ever get it together? And then in a week it can flip.
Right. We could also see that, a stunning 4-1, 3-0 win as well, and all is back right with the Club World Champions.
But within that bubble is even further enhanced for a team like Real. Completely unjustifiably. I hate the criticizing of players like Gareth Bale. I understand that he's not at the moment the $100 million player. That's fine. I understand why that can be frustrating.
The press cycle is so insane.
It's crazy.
We saw fans attacking their own players.
Yeah, I mean they weren't really attacking. It was more of just a kicking his car kind of thing. I saw the video. I mean, but nonetheless, to get that blown up about it is just insane to me. He's a great young player, probably the most athletic guy on the team, more so than Cristiano at this point in his career. You know what he can do. He just helped you win La Decima last year. He's a great player. This attacking trio of him, Ronaldo, and Benzema has the potential to be better than the Messi, Neymar, and Suarez trio. Maybe not at the moment, certainly not, but they have that potential to grow into. I think the one that really needs to take some of the blame is Iker. I've been saying it for a while, but he's past it. I understand having a club legend who is old and not exactly as good as he used to be. As soon as that player becomes a detriment to your team, while you can still find a better option, you need to take that better option.
Right.
If you're a major club like Real are, you just need to cut ties.
We both know that Keylor Navas he's not your stopgap guy like a Diego Lopez was. He's just more of a rotation player, which is fine. And they're not going to throw him out there, or they're not hoping to in a Champions League quarterfinal. So I would expect them to. This is the obvious move we've all been talking about. Take a look into David De Gea. It just makes too much sense. I think we'd love to see him leave the Premier League and join
Well, absolutely. I mean, he's the natural choice. But even if he doesn't leave, or Man United don't want to sell him, there's Petr Cech sitting on the bench at Chelsea. Give us 10 million. You've got him.
Might even take less than that.
I think it's around 10 million.
For all he's done for Chelsea, they may let him go pick out his next club. But I agree with you on what he's worth, if not more.
What I know is that they addressed the situation these last 2 days. Cech has said he wants to leave, and I completely respect his decision on that. That's perfectly fine. He's in the prime of his career. Even at 33, I'd say he has another 5-6 good years left. If he goes to Real, he will help them. He will win them trophies.
Buy them time as well.
He will win them trophies.
How about a Hugo Lloris?
No.
You don't think he's quality? Or?
When there are 2 of the 5 best goalkeepers in the world available in De Gea and Cech, you go for them.
I think they sat too long on De Gea now that United will be returning to Champions League is the one thing that's going to cost them a lot more, or potentially the opportunity. Not that they shouldn't go for him. He is, like you said, the natural choice. They should have jumped on it while they had a better chance.
Another thing that may detract from that idea is that he is an Atletico boy. He came up through their academy, I don't think that rule makes it I don't think that makes it impossible, but I think it plays a small factor. It doesn't make Real as big or as mouth-watering of an option. He's not awed by the lights and of Real Madrid. Man United's not too bad of a club to be with either. So, but that's why I said if that doesn't work out for him, then Petr Cech is sitting right there for 5 or 6 years of an elite goalkeeper who will win you games against Barcelona. He's done it himself. So, I think they should have made that move for Cech back
prior
in January.
to the season.
They should have made that move in January. But you know what? Credit to them. They didn't think Mourinho was right the first time when he benched Iker, so they can live with this decision just a little bit longer.
They made a huge mistake by letting Diego Lopez go too.
I can't speak to that as much because I didn't really see him as much. But they're a club that, by any means, definitely have the resources to go and spend $10 million on a world class, one of the top 5 keepers in the world. So it confuses me as to why they don't just do it. Talking about guys who've dropped $100 million on a Welshman, like dropped $100 million on Cristiano Ronaldo.
Guy will never play in the World Cup ever.
Right, unless they expand it like they have the European Championships. But yeah, I mean, after 20 minutes of talking about Real and a little bit of Atletico Madrid, I think we can safely say we can move on to the next match, which is Juventus and Monaco. I kind of called this happening. In my mind,
You got all 4 matchups right.
yeah, in my mind, I feel like I kind of have a good sense of what UEFA and are looking for out of this year's Champions League and what they've been looking for generally the last couple of years.
Can we be real here for a second? Like we know that the draw, just like with the NBA lottery, is not as transparent as it seems.
You're not fooling anyone. I mean, Chelsea and PSG play each other last year, and
Barca PSG is one that has to happen.
Well, we sell them one of our best players, and what do you know? We're back playing them again this year. What a coincidence.
Schalke and Real Madrid being another one. I think.
Here's my thought process with Juventus. Juventus are a great team. I think they're just outside of that talk with Bayern, Barca, Real. And I'm gonna say Chelsea.
I would say it's fair to put Chelsea in that group, especially with a couple trophies.
I'm gonna put us in that group. We didn't perform like that this time around.
But the ownership, management, and squad all differentiate it from.
But I think Juventus and Atletico are actually in that tier
1A
just
tier?
outside of it. I understand Atletico fans will be mad at me because they are the Spanish champions. I understand that, but obviously when you lose 3 of your most important players, it's despite the replacements, it's hard to say that you're still that same team.
You know what? I was going to mention this in the last previous. I'll say one last thing about Atletico, which is they handled their goalkeeper situation spectacularly, bringing Jan Oblak in for Thibaut Courtois. And they bought a guy who can perform now and give him the future.
Yeah, not only goalkeeper, but Mandzukic we talked about before.
I would have to think he's somewhat short term there. He's unfortunately been...
Yeah, but it's hard to get a stopgap for a 30-goal scorer.
Not just that. Let's talk about the fact that Fernando Torres has unfortunately made some impact.
Well, yeah, he's fine. I mean, he's playing in the right role too. This is a team that Diego Simeone he's very good at kind of shaping and making it very clear what your role and what your place in that team is. And if you're not okay with that, then don't sign with us. It's kind of his spiel, and he says it with such rigor and confidence, and he looks like a guy who knows what he's doing. Which before that last year he hadn't won anything, so people didn't know if he knew what he was doing. So yeah, moving on to, like I said, with Juventus, I think they're just outside of that top tier. And with Carlos Tevez' recent form, and all credit to him, he's been outstanding. With that recent form, I think that comes with a little bit of over evaluation, if I can say that. UEFA doesn't want 1 or 2 leagues dominating everything. I'd say at this point the Spanish champions, the English, and the Germans have obviously been doing pretty well for the past 4 years. The English teams are doing better in like overall during the previous decade, but now we've seen improvement on German teams. We've seen an improvement. Well, Real and Barca were obviously always at this stage of the tournament. Now we've seen Atletico really assert themselves as a very dominant Champions League team as well. But there's always been this little obsession with Italy.
Best league in the world.
It used to be, the 90s.
I grew up. I mean, like this. I grew up on Serie A, so it's kind of crazy to see how it has fallen off. Money being a big reason why.
Here's the thing. I kind of like to save my sleeping time for when I'm not watching soccer. So Serie A isn't really the best league for me, And your favorite Juan Cuadrado came out and said it this week that it wasn't really a direct criticism of Serie A, but he, talking about the differences between the two leagues, between Italy and England, he was saying how he's still adjusting to the style of play, and that England, when you receive the ball or you win the ball back, all English teams, pretty much all of them, are encouraged and are pretty much wired to instantly seek out a vulnerability in the defense, to catch them when they're weakest. I've talked about this before, and that the best time to attack is when a team is just given away the ball because they're not set up to absorb any attacks themselves. English teams pounce on that, and that's why you've got such a high-paced back and forth style, because as soon as you get it, you're looking up and you're launching a ball forward to one of your wingers or one of your forwards. In Italy, there's kind of a gentleman's agreement in that you win the ball back, you keep possession, you pass it back, you keep possession, you allow the team to get back and create their defensive form or their defensive shape, and then you go and you attack them. It's kind of like taking the glove off the hand and smacking the other guy in the face, and it's kind of an archaic way of thinking and playing to me. It's not enjoyable to me.
Almost like a duel. You let the guy get the shot, then you...
Yeah, exactly. Like, I took my shot, now you take yours.
It's so sad to me because, growing up, Italian football was the most popular league. Especially, it was one of the most popular around the world. Number one in Colombia. We had a lot of exports, to Italy. And that's why it was on ESPN and other local channels as well. And you had guys like Gabriel Batistuta, like Fat Ronaldo, just tearing.
He wasn't fat yet.
That's okay. You're right. We're retconning this somewhat.
Almost fat Ronaldo. The Italian league has been dominated by Italian coaching and methods.
The 5-4-1.
Yeah, more so than any other league I can think of. But the way that ties into Juventus is that I just don't see them beating any of the teams in that upper echelon playing that style. I think they're perfectly capable of going out and playing a little bit more of an open style, maybe pressing a bit more, but it's for this team right now, they haven't been doing that this year, and they won't do that this year because that's not how they operate. They showed they could sit back, absorb pressure, and take advantage of space against Borussia Dortmund. But what happens when you substitute Bayern or Barca in there? I don't see it. They have great leadership.
Yeah,
they have a dynamic offensive player in Tevez, and obviously I think arguably the best midfield three in the world.
With Pogba and Vidal.
Pogba, Vidal, and Pirlo. Yeah, that's. I mean, on paper that looks amazing, but they have no width. You know their attack is coming straight up the middle.
Against Bayern especially, that's gonna...
You need some kind of variation. You need some kind of alternate way of attacking them, or like just an alternate option that they fear and respect, that they have to account for. And I just don't think Juventus is doing that.
But they have a fortunate draw this round.
Yeah, they'll go around. They'll go through. Against Monaco.
They were almost beaten by Arsenal.
The first game's at home, which Arsenal fell into the trap of losing. So, but I don't think this team is nearly as juvenile and poorly coached for that specific game. Arsene Wenger handled that completely.
That last goal was an absolute atrocity as well.
I would say it was farcical. If we're going to use SAT vocab words. But But yeah,
When we
Juventus.
said it when it happened, it was going to eliminate them, and it did.
Yeah, it ended up being the goal that eliminated them pretty much. But yeah, they'll go through, and I could see them. I could see. I like this draw for them and for UEFA because it allows UEFA to plug an Italian team into the semifinal against, I'm assuming, one of the Bayern's, Barca's, or Real's.
But you know what? Real Madrid, in particular, I was thinking gives them the best chance to advance. Because
Well, yeah, they're the weakest of those three teams. So, at this moment, but you don't know. Like a month from now, Real Madrid could be on a tear, and people could be absolutely horrified of them. But yeah, I think we both agree Juventus is going to go through in this one. The following day, on Wednesday, April 15th, we have the second cakewalk match of this round that I don't want to say I directly predicted, but I had an idea that Bayern were going to get set up with a fairly easy opponent, and they got Porto. They'll be going to Porto for the first game, and they'll be home in the Allianz Arena in Munich for the second leg. So, are they going to win by 5 goals or more?
I think one. Sometimes the narrative writes itself, and you see it coming from a mile away. As soon as they drew that game against Shakhtar, 0-0, we knew they were coming back and smashing them to pieces, and they did the expected.
The red card in the first.
They shut them down playing down Amanda, but we knew how it would play out. We knew it wouldn't be a close.
No, but I'm saying like the first card. I mean, this just kind of feels like UEFA is just pushing these teams to prominence. Like, okay, these are going to be your semifinalists, and we'll see what happens from there. You know, like they want they want Juventus. I mean, they gave Juventus. It was a tough draw against Borussia Dortmund, but it wasn't.
That's a reeling Borussia Dortmund team, and they.
Yeah, it was
on some level they found their form in the league, and their Champions League play, which had been the top in the group stage, dropped off. I would say as a direct result of that.
UEFA gave you. I mean, we were talking about. UEFA gave Juventus that Dortmund matchup, which was one that fans would watch and was actually a pretty compelling matchup, especially the first leg. But at the same time, like, no one who was sane would have picked Borussia Dortmund to beat Juventus unless their name was Sanjay.
They may have done on the podcast.
So, I mean, the realistic ones in us all kind of knew that Juventus was a mature enough and more talented team to beat Dortmund. And this matchup against Monaco kind of shows that UEFA is kind of like funneling them through to the semi-final to give them this super matchup, this big matchup with one of the other big teams.
I mean, that's why in 2008, especially, it felt pretty rewarding seeing, even as someone who likes City, United and Chelsea in the final, who were the two best teams at the time. They wanted to avoid that all-English matchup, and they got it nonetheless, so...
I'm very happy you said that. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, but with Bayern this year, too, it feels like they're trying to... They're just trying to avoid any more slip-ups,
Especially after that 7-1 spank in the last year.
We can't have any deviations from
the plan.
From the plan.
So if I were to ask you, how would you ideally, just as a fan of good soccer, see this play out and then get drawn out?
The Porto Bayern game?
Just the 4 remaining matchups. I think UEFA succeeded in that, we have our favorites for each one now, but...
I don't think you can go any wrong way in UEFA's mind. Once you have Real, Bayern, Barca, Juventus. Any combination of those 4 playing one another works. We haven't seen Bayern and Barca play each other, or this new version of Barca with Neymar and Suarez and all of that kind of working together.
Versus Pep Guardiola.
Yeah. Versus Pep again, I that would be a great matchup for me. But at the same time, I'd love to see Juventus versus Barcelona. Juventus-Barcelona would be pretty mouth-watering to me, too. I'd love to see Pogba, Pirlo, Vidal really try to take on that Real Madrid midfield, because if anyone can do that and kind of restrict their creative play in midfield, it's those three together. Because Vidal and Pogba can certainly win the ball back, and then Pirlo can certainly keep the ball and make the right pass. So that would be interesting to me too. But getting back to this specific matchup, Bayern and Porto, the first leg, I could see Bayern struggling maybe a little bit. I don't want to undersell Porto. I feel like Porto are on that same kind of level as Shakhtar, maybe even a little bit better. So I could definitely. The first leg is at Porto, at the Estadio Dragao, if I'm correct. So I could see maybe a 0-0 or a 1-1, and then they get absolutely crushed at the Allianz Arena, or maybe even 2-0. I don't know. We both agree. Bayern are probably going to go through here.
That should be the easiest.
But we also said Real were going to absolutely stomp Schalke, so don't take our word for it.
They should have. Had they stuck to the game plan, they
really should have. Yeah. And finally, I guess the premier matchup of the round, unless you're not sick of Real versus Atletico this year,
Barcelona PSG.
Is Barcelona PSG, which is already it's going to be the third and fourth time they played this year. But PSG shown that they have the diversity to play any different form of soccer.
It's a fun one. They eliminated both of our teams in the Champions League. So Barca respectively and PSG.
Oh, I thought you were talking about PSG.
Oh, no.
Okay. Yeah, they did.
Kind of disappointing on both ends. Do you want to talk which the other one first?
I could go on about this all night. It's disappointing for us. Yeah, we are the better team. We're consistently the better team. But on the night, I can say that we didn't take the right strategy. We didn't go about the game the right way, and we didn't honestly have our best game in us that night, which is very rare to see from us. Like, if there's one thing I've grown accustomed to, it's that if there's a big game to be played...
Yeah, you expect to see it against a Sunderland, maybe, of all things.
Yeah, if there's a big game to be played, like, at nighttime on a European night or in a cup final, is that we're gonna have a chance to win it, and we probably should be favored to win it. So it was just shocking to me to see so many of our players underperforming, to see Ivanovic just look absolutely exhausted and fatigued.
And up a man, too.
Yeah, to see... Well, I mean, the explanation for that was that Mourinho does what he's inclined to do in these kind of big games, is that he never wants to concede his defensive shape. You can call that parking the bus. A lot of people will jump to conclusions and call it parking the bus, like, right away. But he wants to attack with the defensive shape in mind.
Well, that's why Diego Costa, and we say it every time in this pod, and we'll continue to say it, was one of the most brilliant buys.
Exactly.
In terms of fitting into that strategy perfectly.
Yeah. He's a part of he's a cog in the greater machine. But, and I hate to use this as an excuse because everyone is fatigued at this point of the season. But the fact that we've played the same starting 11 basically, or certain players in our same starting 11 for every single game, whether it's a Capital One Cup game against Derby or big European night. We're playing. That we're starting Courtois, Terry, Cahill, Ivanovic, Azpilicueta as our back four. They've been fixtures throughout the season. Zuma obviously had a good little run, but in a big game, Mourinho was going to start Cahill. Matic, Fabregas in the midfield. Fabregas especially has started to hit a slump in the second half of the season.
It always happens, though.
It's terrible to see, and you think it's more of a trend now in his career that you just kind of have to think to yourself, this is just
the price for having
what we have to deal with. Oscar looks exhausted. He's not affecting games and imposing himself on games like he was in the early half of the season. To be completely honest, Eden Hazard's the only one who still looks like he's at the same level he was earlier in the season. Those bad performances, coupled with a few pretty bad mistakes from most namely Thibaut on the winning goal, came out for a ball.
Position himself way poorly.
The positioning, and that's usually one of his strengths and one of the things that I think makes him
bizarre after the preceding save.
Yeah, the save, he made the save of the season on the first corner kick, went out of bounds. Think he let it get to his head a little bit. He was had a bit of adrenaline going. Thought to himself, okay, I'm coming out, I'm grabbing this cross, I'm just putting an end to this attack. And he couldn't have come out strongly, even if he wanted to. Got caught in no man's land, and the ball looped over his head and in, and Chelsea are out of Europe. So all credit to PSG. I think if we play that game 9 times out of 10, we win 7 or 8 times. But Mourinho, I think we can say for once, he played it the wrong way and he did the wrong strategy.
Well, so it was definitely a poor loss for Chelsea, but to switch on the other side of the matchup, not necessarily an embarrassing one like the one Manchester City suffered at the hands of.
I don't think that's
Barcelona.
Embarrassing either.
It was you think it's just okay that Barca just outclassed them in every way?
It's
funny because this is how I saw the matchup going. I thought we'd see finally Barca hitting their stride right about now.
Yeah,
and that's what they. I mean, you want to talk about imposing your will on a team? That scoreline should have been ridiculous.
But honestly, no offense to Man City, but it's the kind of matchup that comes at just the right time for them too. It's a tough matchup, but at the same time, it's one that they should comfortably win. And Man City, they never really set up to play the kind of game that Barca would have trouble with. Man City, they're not the kind of team who's going to change what they're doing to account for the other team. They're the kind of team who thinks to themselves, okay, this is how we play, they're going to have to adjust to us. And for most teams, Man City are talented enough and have enough class to really make teams play their game, but not Barcelona.
It's the Indianapolis Colts syndrome.
Yeah, Barca's thinking, okay, you're going to press up the field and try and attack us? Great, more room for Ivan Rakitic and obviously Messi, Suarez, and Neymar have room to just run freely, but
Joe Hart was tremendous. That was the one standout performance. But on the other hand,
cap off to him.
Vincent Kompany, who's just fallen completely out of form. Martin de Michelis, who makes you wonder what he's doing playing professional soccer.
I actually have a theory for Kompany. My theory for him is due to his lack of a decent partner in the center of the defense, is that he feels that in his stopper role, he has to do everything. Like, he has to be perfect. He plays like almost, they say, like, play the game, have fun when you're playing the game. He looks like every tackle he's making could be his last. Looks like every header is the last one he could be making, which can be a great attitude to have. But when you're thinking to yourself, I need to win this ball or they're definitely going to score, and you go for a ball that maybe is better that you sit back and maybe wait for a striker or forward to have his first touch, and you can go forward and try and win it from there. It affects his decision making, which is everything.
Almost the polar opposite of a David Luiz.
In what sense?
I'm more in that mentality.
David Luiz has always had has had a partner. Has always had a solid.
Fair, but I'm saying more in terms of he allows himself to be a little more reckless, which can hurt him, but adds so much to the team when he's on his
right. But when
I get what you're saying.
So you're saying an opposite in that Vincent Kompany is like David Luiz. He just doesn't have the partner who can make up for his deficiencies.
He doesn't have a Thiago Silva, who even on an off day is still a very good defender. He has Mangala, who's been so far at least a complete bust for City, failing to fit in there. And again, David Michelis, who we're wondering if he hadn't played for Malaga, would even be playing on this squad.
Well, Eloquent Mangala looks like he's like the most athletic guy on the field, super tall, super athletic, very fast, long legs, like has it all. people forget he's 21 years old or 22. And this is his first year playing for a major club like Man City. You know, he's not. It's not the same as PSG signing David Luiz from Chelsea, who's played in one Champions League.
Sure, but we have someone like your guy, Kurt Zuma, who has been able to be plugged in and at least, provide decent.
But Kurt Zuma, despite the great tackles and terrific displays he's had, plays next to John Terry, who says, "You know what? Go get him, young fella. You go out, you go and you have a ball." And he makes a bunch of mistakes that no one really sees. Because they don't really, they don't televise your mistakes unless they lead to a goal.
How highly I rate Kurt Zuma.
I rate him very highly too, but he's not quite ready to be that full-time center back yet for us, I don't think. You guys need a disciplined, calm, very solid presence in there. Someone who can say to a Vincent Kompany, "You go out and do your thing." He's a great ball-winning center back. He will break your leg to get, and you see him. He played Diego Costa perfectly in the first game against us. There was a game we saw them almost punching each other to get to the ball, and that's the kind of guy you want to go against a physical forward like Costa. But at the same time, you need someone sitting back and who will read the attacking options, find another forward who's maybe making a run in to receive a pass from that guy who has the ball and can make the interception or can cover the guy accordingly. You guys just don't have right now. And Barca just feasted off of it. You saw Rakitic's goal in everyone is just shifted over to that side where Lionel Messi and company are on. He just gives a little chip over the back as he watches Rakitic run in behind your defense.
There's a lot of reasons to pick Barca here, which I am doing. But Messi, who's always been an all-time great, is back in that absolute dominant form again, which even when it dips, he's one of the best players in the world. But he is unquestionably right now the best player in the world, the way he's playing. These back-to-back games against City and Real Madrid was just something else.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Barca also.
Yeah. Like we said, Suarez is now finally hitting his stride with this squad.
Yeah. I'd give PSG more of a chance if Zlatan was playing.
But he's missing. Is he missing both games or just the first one?
Just the first one, I believe. That card was really, really unfortunate. It wasn't a red card.
We both agree on that.
I apologize on behalf of Chelsea Football Club. Because honestly, we might have even won that game if he hadn't gotten sent off, which is kind of a crazy thing to think. But Zlatan's the kind of player who you can play like shit for 90 minutes, somehow not concede a goal, and he'll win you the match by himself. And that in itself is a huge asset to have. But I think they're probably going to lose maybe 1-0 or 2-0 at home, and then
2-1 or something, 3-1.
Implode at Camp Nou.
You think it'll be worth? Okay.
Because they barely beat Barca earlier in the season when they were playing even a little bit better. Cavani's been
just a poor fit for them up top too, especially this season. They need that. They need to be able to exploit, Jeremy Mathieu and then Piqué at the back, and they're not really going to have a good time with that.
Where they will have a good time though is their midfield is pretty formidable. We're talking about how good and how many good ball-winning defensive and possession-based midfielders that Juventus have. PSG, that's one thing I was very impressed with last year and this year when we played them.
And Blaise Matuidi.
They won't have Verratti for the first match. They'll have him for the second. But even you can plug in Thiago Motta, Johan Cabaye is a very good possession-based player. He can also go forward and shown he's pretty good at distributing while going forward while attacking. I just don't think they have enough punch up top.
No, I mean...
No Zlatan, and you're leaning on basically Cavani, Lavezzi, Pastore,
or Lucas Moura. Yeah, that's
Lucas Moura. Yeah, it's
kind
not
of disappointing.
I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong.
They've done well to get here, and this has been their aim. Get here, and they've blown a lead against Barca before, a 2-goal lead. They'd love nothing more than to beat them, than draw a Juventus, and hopefully advance to the final. But I think it's unlikely to happen. Barca is playing their best soccer of the year, right as it comes to the Colos. They're first in La Liga.
Yeah.
They're right now, to me, the most intimidating team in Champions League.
I disagree. I think Bayern. Bayern are, while they haven't had the matchups to like allow themselves to like impress like the world, and people just think, oh wow, Bayern's blowing out another nobody, big deal. I mean, I still think that team, even though they've won a Champions League and numerous Bundesliga titles before, that team's pissed off after that last year. I get that Real Madrid are obviously a great team, but losing at home like that, that does not sit well. Pep Guardiola teams do not do that.
Well, Barca's done it again, though. Look, they winning Champions League with Victor Valdez, who's always a more solid player than given credit for, but not world class. And now with Claudio Bravo
And Marc-Andre ter Stegen.
Yeah, they've shown they can do it with a rotation with good but not world beaters. It's pretty impressive. You can do it in Champions League. Inter did it with Julio Cesar in 2010.
He was a world class keeper at the time.
He was up there. I mean, he wasn't Casillas back then.
Mourinho wouldn't have played him otherwise. Mourinho would not have gone into a Champions League campaign with him as his goalie if he didn't think he was world class and could win him.
But that's a Champions League that ended with Diego Milito scoring a winning goal.
Diego Milito was our Jose Mourinho player.
Well, right, but this is more a testament to Mourinho.
Put him on 10 teams, and 9 of them he's not going to score you 20 goals. Right, but on the 10th team with Jose Mourinho and that lineup of players that Inter had in 2010, he's going to get you 20 or 30 goals.
But, I mean, that's the thing. Barca, and we mentioned before, this is exactly what they need to do. They're in somewhat of a slight transitional stage, and they're still now, they know Messi, Suarez, Neymar up top. They've got them, even with Messi starting to slowly age. They know they have their future secure there for 5 years, barring anything crazy with Suarez. You want to know an insane stat I was reading this week? We know this isn't Iniesta's role on the team, but he's gone a year without scoring or providing an assist in La Liga. He, like you said, the pass before the assist.
And when people were saying he was the heir to Xavi, they weren't fucking kidding. Xavi was never as dynamic of a goal scorer and like an assist making player as Iniesta was like in his prime, but you saw him kind of like remake himself and be even better of a player for that like those 2007 2008 Barcelona teams.
Right, this guy who scored the winning goal in the World Cup 4 years ago for Spain.
I'm talking about Xavi, like remade himself going into those 2008 2009 Barcelona teams and that 2010 Spain team as the deep-lying Pirlo kind of possession-based playmaker. And we've seen Iniesta do the exact same. They have Rakitic, they have Javier Mascherano, they have Sergio Busquets to play in defensive midfield and clean up any messes that Barcelona could possibly make, even though I can't think of too many. And they have... all those players are just as good going forward.
And the good thing for them, they bought well, because the transfer ban is in effect now, so...
Yeah, and don't expect them to sell anyone anytime soon. They're going to keep this core together, and this core of players is going to be really, really good over the next couple of years. So they're going to be PSG. We think it might be close going into the second leg at Camp Nou, but as we've seen Barca and teams like Bayern do many times, they're just going to assert themselves over very, very good teams like PSG.
And like you said, that's something a Barca or a Bayern Munich can do, and a Manchester City can't. That's the difference.
Manchester City's kind of in that class of team with Juventus and kind of maybe
I'd say as much as I don't like saying the European success is still a little lacking there. But we'll see. They could be headed for an overhaul this summer. I think it's likely we end up doing a Manchester City turnover episode. So.
I mean, it's a complacency issue, and when it comes to complacency, I think that's the only way to fix it. So thanks for listening to our quarterfinal preview episode. We hope the games are firecrackers because
they always are.
Yeah, last round of games wasn't too great, especially for me as a Chelsea fan. Thanks for listening, and I hope you listen next time.